the whole point of today is we've got some great people willing to share their time with us, and all in the hope of really raising more money for the American Red Cross and their disaster relief. So keep those coming in. Thank you so much for doing that. I am joined this morning. We've got some of our Stormfront Freaks co-hosts first.
This is amazing. I love everyone here, the mission.
We've also got our co-creator, co-host, co-producer, and my brother, Mark MJ Johnson, joining us this morning. Thanks, MJ.
Yeah, good morning, everybody. Good to be here. This is a lot of fun. It's a good,
and then
cause.
Brady Harris. Brady Harris is one of our co-hosts as well. Brady's joining us from Columbus. Brady, good morning.
Hey, Phil. I don't have any exotic rugs behind me like MJ does, but I'm working on it.
That's good. And we're still joined by Weather Brains Bill Murray. We got Carly Sisson with us, but we want to jump to our first guest here. Mike Boylan, creator of Mike's Weather Page. He's also a storm chaser. Mike, thanks for joining us. I know you got some softball or something like that going on today. Is this you or one of your kids?
Oh, it's my kids. It's my second love. I don't know what I love more, is watching her play or chasing a good storm. But today I get to do both. Or this week I did the big storms in Miami a couple of days ago, and here I am watching her play. So it's a perfect week and doing your all's telethon. So there we go.
Well, we definitely appreciate you joining us. So thanks for the time on that. And I'm going to tell all of our co-hosts what we do on Stormfront Freaks is if you've got a question, you just kind of jump in, and whoever's the loudest tends to get their question in first. But Mike, I want to first get a little feedback from you on this year's tropical season. What was your take on this year? What were your thoughts on it?
I think beginning of the year, I stress the importance of, it only takes one. Sometimes we get these seasons with a lot of names. We almost had Vince today. So I think it comes down to all that preseason hype of a busy season versus a slow season. And sometimes we only get one or two landfalling systems. And that's the one thing that I think it stands out is, everybody thinks it's a dead season when they're not affected. And we really only had Idalia. We still had a third active season ever, but we really only had one memorable storm. So it just kind of shows you that tropics are tricky. We saw over in Mexico with Acapulco there what could happen overnight. So always you just can't turn your back on the tropics. That's for sure.
I want to actually, Mike, expand on Phil's question. So he talked about the tropical season this year. What about like the year as a whole when it comes to chasing storms? Was there anything that stood out for you, and kind of break down some of your biggest chases?
Yeah, well, Idalia we went to Idalia, and that was a different storm for us up here because we had surge all the way basically where Ian made landfall. Some places down in Fort Myers area had more surge than they did with Ian, and it was a storm that was 100 miles off the coast. So I think the biggest impact for me was the non-direct landfall of a storm, and the whole west coast of Florida experienced flooding, and every town where I live had FEMA set up. And we're talking Palm Harbor, Clearwater, Tarpon Springs, the Sponge Docks, places that have never flooded had water inland. I mean, I went to Crystal River, which was way away from the landfall, and they had water a mile from the coast. And there was locals walking around. They look like zombies because they've never seen it. Locals have never saw water come inland that far. So those are things that I take away. The non-landfall effects in Valdosta, Georgia. Like, this storm was so strong, there was pine trees everywhere. Interstate 10 was closed. So it reinstates how important to discuss inland effects and not where the storm hits, because there was people that, again, up in Georgia that thought it was only going to be a Florida event, and they're looking around and they got trees down everywhere. So that was my most memorable thing, I think, was just how many people were affected from a storm that was 100 miles off the coast here on the West Coast. And we had record surge. And it was a wake-up call for Tampa, where I live, that they had flooding that they've never seen in Tampa Bay. Again, from a storm when the sun was out, we were getting flooded. So surge is a real deal. And I think that was, the big thing for me is what surge can really do.
Yeah. And Mike, and that's a really interesting point, right? Because you're right that, there was storm surge with with sunshine out, right? That's like, how do you
Yep.
do you think the public, like, do you think people that you were seeing were ready for that? Like, did they
Totally.
expect the amount of flooding or no?
No, totally no. Because I had people locals kind of calling me out because I saw we had a storm called Ada a couple years ago in 2020, and we had hundreds of homes flooded in Pinellas. Same situation. It was a tropical storm that was only 60 miles off our coast. Everything lined up. We had, the new moon, tide cycles. And what I've learned from these storms, something that I never really learned until Idalia, especially, is when you have a persistent southwest wind here during high tide, it drives all that water in. But when that wind stays, the low tide never gets a chance to escape. So then when the second high tide came in, that's when we had our surge, several hours after Idalia was gone. That's when midday the next day we had these high surge values.
Yeah.
Cedar Key, for example, I tried to go out there, that's where Cantori was camped out. It was closed. It was still underwater. The bridge, the little causeway was underwater from the secondary surge from high tides. That's something that I think fascinates me, is when the low tide never gets a chance to escape, and then the next tide comes in with those winds, and we get that additional surge that nobody really expected.
Yeah, because I'm pretty sure too, it was the historic high tide, right? It was one of the actual surge combined with the fact that this was the highest tide of the year was just a recipe for disaster. And I can't even imagine having to try and communicate to that, hey, we're not going to get hit with the hurricane, but you're still going to have storm surge. Like, the public doesn't understand storm surge as it is, how do you explain, hey, the center of this thing is going to be 100 miles off our coast, but we're still going to get storm surge flooding, and we're still going to have flooding along the coast. Like, I would, if I'm a person that lives there, I'm just going to be like, it's not going to hit me. I'm going to be fine.
Totally. And it goes back to the cone, what the NHC wants to try to figure out a different way to showcase the cone because of what happened with Ian. The eye was right on that edge of the bottom part of the cone. A lot of people focus on that center line and the effects that can can happen outside that cone. And again, we're talking a storm that was 100 miles away, and so many people were flooded. I have not seen final numbers yet, but Homosassa Springs, Crystal River, all these little cities, Yankeetown and stuff. If anybody knows driving on US 19 North, every one of these little towns had serious flooding. And again, like you said, everybody thinks the storm's going north, and so going back to that statement, here at the softball field, I'm meeting a lot of folks that live in Fort Myers, and that storm still bothers me of how the emotions swung with every 6-hour update. And folks in Tampa, when that thing, for one cycle, they had the models go into the panhandle of Florida. So everybody here in Tampa is like, oh, it's going west. Especially Fort Myers, it's like 2 days before, right? They're like, oh, that's not our storm. And then so the emotions with swings on these shifts. Down at Wink News, they're doing
Matt DeWitt.
Matt. Thank you, because I just drew a blank. But he went out on a limb, and they've changed their graphics, and they don't show the center line anymore.
Mm-hmm.
They have a cone with just a cone, and that's the biggest thing is I think educating people and the inland effects. That's the number one thing I hear is like, oh my God, I had no idea, because everybody's so focused on landfall.
Yeah. And Mike, you bring up a good point about, I like how they took out the center part of the storm. So it's just the cone, because I think that's really difficult, even, for everyone to understand, okay, what do we need to do? How do we need to prepare? And, for the public to prepare and do what they need to get all their resources and everything in line. And it can be one of the most difficult things when it comes to communicating, on TV. Now, Mike, I'd love to know more about a little bit into tornado chasing and what you've done there and some big things.
Oh God, I'm a rookie. I joke, I haven't met Reed, and I've tried. This last little tornado outbreak that we had here at home, I did capture our Oldsmar tornado on a drone. So I'm getting better, and we did have damage here, and I felt good because the National Weather Service in Tampa actually used my footage. They didn't even designate this a tornado until I had the footage, and we had some homes that were damaged. So I am getting a little better reading, vorticity signals, and learning what side to be on and don't be on the rain side. I mean, I went to Georgia over the summer and I was on the other side of the tornado, and I'm like getting hail and I can't see, and all the smart chasers were on the south side and on the dry side, So, and tornadoes are frustrating to me because they bounce, they don't stay on the ground very long. And so yeah, that we did have a pretty big outbreak here, where I live in Curlew, and the Curlew Causeway is pretty famous in Dunedin, and we had significant EF2 damage there. And I was in the parking lot, and I just had a bad feeling, so I got the heck out of Dodge, and that's exactly where it hit. That was the one with the portalet. I don't know if you saw the videos. There was a portalet that ended up on a street light. I was right underneath that. So something told me to get out. I just, so I'm kind of scared of tornadoes. I feel confident with hurricanes. I know the direction of the wind. I know where, I know how to stay away from the surge. So the tornadoes are tricky. And I think, how many chasers, go a whole season, right? And they just get that one or two, successful chases, but how many, like 100 did they fail at, right? So I think tornadoes are tricky, right? We see it with SPC all the time. Sometimes they get, dark green and they get an outbreak and they go, all the way up and they don't get one. So I think Mother Nature is smarter than a lot of us.
This is true. Very true. Mike.
All right. Hey, before we go to break, Brady, you got one last quick question. Go ahead.
I was going to say, so Mike, with El Nino the way it is this year, right? I know Florida generally gets a little bit more active, a little bit more wet, a little bit more active in the severe weather season. Do you think you'll be chasing this winter down in Florida in your backyard?
I totally believe it. I spent some time researching El Nino Florida effects, and there's a lot of great graphs been put out from National Weather Service. And historically, strong El Ninos bring the highest flood chances, almost like triple the amount of flooding events. Obviously, tornadoes. I understand with the jet stream. That's what we just saw last week or a couple of days ago down in Miami. Definitely a product of El Nino. Jet stream fueled storms, in the Gulf's still 80 degrees. So I really believe it. We got another one coming down Tuesday they're talking about, and I just looked at the latest models again. And so, yeah, we're going to be getting that weather, unfortunately. And we did have a tornado outbreak a couple weeks ago, and kind of the same deal. When every time you bring that jet stream into the mix, and we have the Gulf, I'm believing that more than ever that we're going to see an active Florida season.
Well, Mike, I want to thank you for your time joining us this morning, all to kind of help support the Red Cross and disaster relief, because I know you've seen that a lot yourself.
Yes. And I will say, I support the Red Cross. They actually did a hurricane special from our house like 5 years ago, and it's on the bottom of my page if everybody wants to see it. So I always give them credit because they gave me a little credit back when I was small, and I really appreciated that from them. So I always try to throw them a support now and then when I can too. So.
Well, great. Well, Mike, again, thanks for your time. Before we go to break, I want to quick recognize Tasha Kirksey donated $50. So thank you, Tasha. Shannon Bolesky, who's been a guest on our show before, Storm Chaser. Thank you. And Jenny Lassiter, she was our first donor. She's donated again. So she's one of a couple people I've now seen as a double donator. Let's make it triple, quadruple. Who knows? We got a few more hours to go, but we'll be right back with Bruce Jones from Midland Radio. All right, Mike, thank you, buddy. Appreciate it.
Yeah, I didn't know, but thank you so much.
Everyone.
Todos.
الجميع مرحب بهم.
欢迎.
مرحبا.
At an American Red Cross shelter.
Cuando se produce un desastre en su zona.
The Red Cross may open.
يفتح ملجأ.
Where you can sleep.
用餐.
To get you back on your feet.
لن يطلب الصليب الأحمر.
Never ask.
Your citizenship status.
ولن يشارك معلوماتك الخاصة.
Sin su permiso.
也无论您从哪里来。
Everyone.
Todos.
الجميع مرحب بهم.
At an American Red Cross shelter. To learn more about the Red Cross or to find an open shelter in your area, go to redcross.org or call 1-800-RED-CROSS.
All right, back with the Weather Pod's Disaster Relief Telethon. Again, thanks for watching and tuning in. Do us a favor and tell all your friends, all your weather geeks, message them right now and let them know this is going on, because we still got another 10 plus hours to bring you with some great guests And again, our co-hosts right now, we've got Jen Watson, MJ, Brady Harris, Bill Murray from Weather Brains, but we are welcoming in one of my favorites, Bruce Jones, meteorologist at Midland Radio, one of their top spokespeople. And we love having you on, Bruce. I wanted to bring you on specifically because when we cover disaster relief, that's a big part of what you do and you guys are doing at Midland, which is trying with the emergency radios, let people know and warn people in advance of what's coming so that they're not caught in something like that. But thanks for joining us this morning.
Hey, I appreciate the opportunity to be here. And for those of you who are watching or listening online, this is a fundraiser for the American Red Cross. And I can tell you personally, I've been working with the American Red Cross closely over the last year and a half, maybe 2 years now. And they have done fantastic work providing weather radios to towns and counties that have been smacked by severe weather, or in the case of Hawaii, by wildfire. In the aftermath of any disaster, post-traumatic stress disorder is a huge issue amongst those who have survived. Whether you lost something in it or not, there's a lot of PTSD after these disasters. For the American Red Cross to be able to go around to these communities and hand each homeowner a NOAA weather radio is a tremendous shot in the arm and really helps them with their mental health issues. Because in the aftermath of something destructive in your hometown, whether you fight it or not, you're going to have a lot of mental issues that come to the surface every time the sky turns dark or the wind starts blowing. You can't control it. It just pops up. But the American Red Cross will go into these communities and hand people a NOAA weather radio. And that radio basically is like an umbrella of safety over that home and that family. So what we're doing here is raising funds for the American Red Cross so that they can continue in these efforts. And I give them an A+ in everything that I've seen them do.
And Bruce, let's talk a little bit about having that secondary source of confirmation when there's severe weather, specifically a tornado, because there's been a lot of social scientists that have gone in after disasters. And what they found is it takes a lot of people, once either they get an alert on their phone or they hear the siren, they need that secondary source of confirmation before they actually take shelter. And also another fact is, a lot of times we can get severe weather when we're sleeping and you can't rely on the outdoor sirens to wake you up. So why is it so important to have a weather radio and another source of confirmation?
Yeah, that's a great question, Jen. I'll tell you, when I was a kid, we lived in Austin, Texas. This was in the 1960s. In Austin, Texas, we did not have central air conditioning in our home. Central air was for rich people.
Yeah.
You kept your windows open. In Texas, in Austin, Texas,
gosh.
You kept your windows open in the spring and summer. Tornado season, your windows were open. So an outdoor siren might have been a little more audible in those days. But those sirens are designed to warn you when you're outdoors. And at 2 o'clock in the morning, unless you're out walking your dog at 2 a.m., you're not supposed to hear that siren inside your home. NOAA weather radio was specifically designed to be an indoor tornado siren because we recognized this problem in the 60s, the 70s, and it persists today. Now people put so much faith in this cell phone that if your local cell phone tower goes down, you need to understand you may get nothing at all from this phone. And that was the situation in Cookeville, Tennessee in 2020. Nocturnal tornado, middle of the night. People who went to bed relying on this cell phone to wake them up got nothing because 2 of the big cell phone towers that serve Cookeville were disabled by earlier wind damage. NOAA weather radio had the tornado warning 11 minutes in advance. Anyone in Cookeville with a weather radio had 11 minutes to take shelter. 19 people died that night. F4 tornado, Cookeville, Tennessee, a suburb of Nashville. But, you know, after that tornado, our online sales in Tennessee and Kentucky went up 6 1,000%.
Wow.
Wow. Yeah.
Wow.
So people get the message after, and I understand that, but we try to get the message out before. And so American Red Cross has done wonderful work in the aftermath of these storms, but it's up to each of us individually to do something preceding these storms.
Sure. So
get warnings.
So Bruce, I've got a question because we know all of all of the weather radios come with the same technology, right? That's designed so that you can program your county, your locale because that's one of the things people say, I don't want it going off all the time for, it's just like we hear, right, from media, right? They don't want to hear it if it's not in their area.
Yeah.
Can you tell us what's the best way for any of us out here in the community, if we're working with people, doing a distribution of these radios, doing some things like that, best way to get people to be able to program that themselves? What are the resources available to help them figure out how to program it for their locale?
Yeah, that's a great question. We've made it a lot easier. First of all, when you buy a weather radio, look for the public alert designation. Public alert is not advertising. It's the Consumer Technology Association. They set standards for these devices because they want them to be true life-saving devices. So get a public alert certified weather radio, and that one you can program to go off just for your county. And it's easy now because it's all alphabetical. When you do set location, it says USA or Canada, you pick USA. And then it says what state in the USA, you pick your state, and then it has the alphabetical list of counties, and you find your county and set it in there, and it's done. And we have partial county alerting coming here real soon, where some counties of the United States will be partitioned into smaller segments, and then you can set your weather radio to only go off for the northwest or the southeast corner of your county, and you'll only get the tornado warnings for your specific section of the county. So you're capable of doing that right now, but the emergency managers need to meet with National Weather Service and decide how to subdivide their counties.
So Bruce Jones, Bill Murray here. You have a print of a painting on your wall behind you that was in the World Book Encyclopedia when I was a kid. And that print scared me to pieces, Bruce, because that was just a terrifying situation. And it reminded me of too many times, having to go to the, as we call them in Alabama, storm pit. That was a very intimidating name, but it's good to see you. You got any weather history for us today? Anything that happened on this date?
Not off the top of my head, but let me respond to you about that. I had the same World Book Encyclopedia, and that was one of my motivations for getting into weather. That and the Wizard of Oz movie that I saw when I was 5. But that picture right there, if you study it, it's just the most dynamic picture. It's called Tornado in Kansas or Tornado over Kansas, and it's by Curry, Curry. The original's up in Grand Rapids, Michigan, as I recall, or Kalamazoo, or someplace up there in an art museum. But it's wonderful. It's the family taking shelter as the tornado's coming, and there's some drama in there as the cat is getting ready to bolt out of the little boy's arms, and something interesting is about to happen as they try to get to the shelter, but the little boy may be running to chase after the cat. But
and what they would have given for a weather radio back then.
Yeah. So basically, to wrap up, I'll tell you, National Weather Service has developed this network of 1,033 transmitters. They send out a signal 24/7, 365. The weather radio's job is to silently monitor that signal. And so most of the year, a weather radio, it really just sits there silently. It's plugged in, has battery backup, so it'll work in a power failure, but it's plugged into the wall and it silently monitors that. And when there's trouble, it goes off, just like a smoke detector does. These should be standard in every home in the United States of America. And for those of you watching, please make a donation to the American Red Cross, because they've sent these radios to Mayfield, Kentucky. They just sent a bunch of them down to Louisiana. They've sent them to Tennessee. They've sent them to Maui County and the island of Maui. The American Red Cross is working with the National Weather Service and county and state emergency managers to get more of these devices out there, because we know early warning saves lives.
Well, Bruce, thanks so much for taking the time to join us this morning. Definitely appreciate you having it on, and good to see you.
Good to see you guys. And thanks for the opportunity. Everyone, please make a donation.
Yeah. So on that note, some people we want to highlight. Michelle donated $25. So thank you, Michelle. Carrie Monster donated $150. So Carrie Monster, thank you so much. That's going to help a lot of people. And Jessica Woodall, $25 as well. Thank you very much, everybody who's helping to give. I know we got a bunch of people that have been ripping it up on the chats as well. Hopefully we'll be talking with you guys as well. We got a lot of stuff going on. But we're going to head to break here a little bit. We're going to be right back with Reed Timmer. So stay tuned.
When natural disasters like Hurricane Katrina or Sandy happen, Red Cross emergency response vehicles and volunteers make the news. But rarely shown is the fact that on average, Red Cross workers help a family affected by a home fire or other disaster 180 times a day. The Red Cross is there for nearly 64,000 disasters per year throughout the U.S., helping people like Gene Welsh of Sioux Falls, South Dakota. A smoke alarm installed by the Red Cross saved Gene's life, going off just in time for him to escape only moments before flames engulfed his house. The Red Cross helps people like Gene in communities all across the U.S., maybe even people you know. Generous donors make this work possible. Donor gifts enable the American Red Cross to sustain a strong nationwide infrastructure comprised of local offices, robust training, integrated IT and communication systems, a fleet of response vehicles, warehouses stocked with shelter and relief supplies, and partners to help mobilize to support one family or 100,000 families. The Red Cross also relies on a network of 330,000 volunteers in communities throughout the country who respond night and day, answering the call for help. So when you hear stories about people like Gene Welsh, you may realize that the Red Cross is your Red Cross too, a local charity staffed and supported by your neighbors, making a difference every day in your own community. You can make a difference in your community too. To join the mission to help people affected by disasters, big and small, visit redcross.org/give.
All right, we're moving on with the WeatherPod's Disaster Relief Telethon, and we've got an opportunity now to bring in extreme meteorologist Dr. Reed Timmer. Reed, welcome to the telethon this morning.
Thanks for having me. Never stop chasing.
Absolutely. So besides the fact I love your hat, by the way, but we're talking. I want to just start off right off the bat here. So this is all for the American Red Cross disaster relief. I know certainly with the number of storms you've been involved in, both tornadoes, tropical blizzards, winter storms, floods, you've kind of covered the gambit. I am really curious to know what are some of the top disasters that you've seen that you still remember and kind of still hit with you a little bit.
Well, probably the first one that I ever saw that kind of got when I first started storm chasing in 1999 was the May 3rd, 1999 tornado, the F5 that went from down west of Chickasha up through Moore and South Oklahoma City. And we were freshmen at the University of Oklahoma at that time, and 5 of us were packed in a soft top Geo Tracker.
Oh, nice.
Cool vehicle from back in the day. And
I had one of those.
Yeah, they're a collector's item probably now.
Yeah.
And it was my friend Matt Sandus's Geo Tracker, and we were all packed in there. And then we ended up seeing the first couple tornadoes from that supercell, and then we kind of meandered through a forest and ended up in the path of it somehow. And someone in the vehicle had the bright idea to abandon the Geo Tracker and run for an overpass when it was coming at us. And there was a family freaking out underneath the overpass, but thankfully the tornado wobbled a little bit right when it was approaching us, missed us just to the north. But then we hopped in the car and then we saw the damage that tornado caused up in Moore, and we saw horses just wandering down I-44, people starting to emerge from their homes. And that was kind of the first time that I'd ever really seen that kind of war zone like damage that a big tornado can leave behind.
And Reed, I'd love to ask you a question because you have seen so many storms, have done so much research as well. I remember when I was working in Tupelo, Mississippi, and you would come down to Hyperion Technology Group and you'd be working with the engineers and trying to, create your cool things, that you'd send into the storm. But you have a lot of data, and, we still don't know why some supercells produce tornadoes and some don't. What is some of the most powerful, data and research that you found from your years of storm chasing and just your experience overall?
Well, definitely the rocket launch into the Linwood, Kansas EF4 tornado back in 2019, and even back when we were working with Hyperion Technology Group, we were trying to design miniaturized sensors that could live stream data and their GPS position. But back then, the technology wasn't quite ready for us to recover those sensors. And so we launched a lot into tornadoes and we never saw them again. They would just get carried away for many miles and we would lose those sensors many times. And the ones that we would find were the ones that didn't get inside of the tornado, that got deflected straight to the ground. And so finally in 2019, we got a sensor into a tornado, and meeting up with Mark Simpson, who's Chasing Spin on Twitter, he hand built all of those miniaturized sensors, and it finally worked on that day in late May in 2019. And it did 2 revolutions around the tornado and measured a pressure perturbation of negative 113.5 millibars to as it went up kind of in the lower levels of the tornado. And then also sampled the mesocyclone as well up there. And so I think that for discriminating between non-tornadic and tornadic supercells, probably the data collected in the environment around the tornado is more important. But for us over the years, we've kind of been focused on collecting data inside of the tornado, which I think is kind of more difficult. It's associated with a safety risk too in there. And so I think when we do self-funded research that isn't really attached to the government or a research institution, that it makes it possible for us to get closer to the tornadoes and to try to deploy sensors inside without having to deal really with some of the safety issues that I guess are at play. But we still, of course, when we launch our rockets, we're always sufficiently far away from power lines, and it's always a legal launch, and you have to follow all the local regulations and everything too, as well with the rocket.
Reed, what's your guys' latest technology you guys are using with sensors? Like, is it drones, or because I know there's all this regulation now that we have around those, right?
Yeah, our most recent project has been launching those miniaturized sensors with model rockets that are custom built from the roof of the Dominator.
That's so awesome.
So then we're getting the path of it from the inflow notch, and we've learned over the years that we really need the propulsion of that the rocket engine provides, because around the tornado, almost every tornado I've ever chased has that sheath of sinking motion around it that's associated with the occlusion process at any given level. So if you try to launch a parachute probe from far out of the tornado and it's riding the inflow toward it, it'll just go straight to the ground before reaching the core of the tornado. But if you have a rocket or even a racing drone, like an FPV drone, and you can get through that sheath of sinking air, get into the tornado, and then you just have this dynamic pipe of a cyclonically rotating updraft, probably up above 10 or 11,000 feet. And then it, I think, levels off into the tilted mesocyclonic flow a little bit more.
Yeah, it's crazy to think about, right? Like I just remember from watching your old TV shows, like you have to get it just right. When you launch a drone, you can't just launch it towards the storm and it's going to go into the tornado. You have to line it up with the wind vectors and make sure you're not going to get a burst of sinking air like you were saying. And it's crazy, right? But it's always really cool just to see the data you produce, and it's like the hunt for Red October meets storm chasing, right? That's awesome.
Yeah, and it's fun to collect data inside of a tornado too. And I love just storm chasing with just my potato phone, and a pair of shorts and a beater vehicle. But when you're trying to collect data inside too, it kind of adds some more stakes and a little bit more fulfillment, I guess, with the whole storm chasing process. I like to do the ground probes too. But with self-funded research, it is tough because it is kind of a one-way street. There's definitely no saving up for retirement or anything, and
no
funded science.
Yeah.
Reed, Bill Murray here. Always love everything you do, and loved the show Tornado Chasers. Talk about that show for a second, and then just spend a moment and talk to us about Tim Samaras and what he meant to you.
Sure. Yeah. Tornado Chasers was our kind of independent production that we did after Storm Chasers. So that was canceled after the 2011 season. And we partnered with all our old camera guys from Storm Chasers and Ken Cole, who we've worked with since our University of Oklahoma years. He's always been a independent film guy in addition to a meteorologist too. And we did our first show, Tornado Glory, back in the early 2000s with Ken as part of his student project at the University of Oklahoma. And so we partnered with him on Tornado Chasers and did 2 seasons, and definitely was a fun time. Our goal was to kind of cover the more realistic side of storm chasing, whereas Storm Chasers, there was a little bit of a scripting that happened in there too, and you had to bounce from team to team, but we tried to keep it a little bit more raw in the 2012 and 2013 seasons. And I was very close with Tim, and we were on the same show with Storm Chasers before that as well. And Tim is someone that I always looked up to as well, and inspired a lot of our science too. And I've discussed the turtle probes a lot with him. And Tim also worked with Hyperion Technology Group too, the engineers down in Tupelo. And he developed his pitot tube anemometer that we had on the Dominator back then, which doesn't have the moving part, so it's capable of measuring some stronger wind speeds as well. And I saw Tim a couple of days before the El Reno tornado after the Cora, Kansas intercept in the Dominators, and I was also good friends with Carl Young as well, and his son Paul. But Tim was always, someone that was an inspiration to me, someone I looked up to. I would say a mentor figure as well in terms of the science and the storm chasing and kind of how to work with, the traditional research and the professional meteorologists, and also do self-funded research and storm chasing. And his legacy still lives on, and all the work that we do, and always striving to do our own science no matter what the circumstances. And he's forever missed as well. He was always looking out for our safety and always worried about whether we're okay when we were storm chasing too. So but yeah, I loved Tim, and definitely will be forever missed. He's a pioneer of storm chasing science, and there's a lot of people in the professional meteorology community that view storm chasing as a little bit less important as to other aspects of professional meteorology, like television meteorology, for example, or National Weather Service forecasters or research meteorologists. And I just feel like Tim was kind of at the leading edge of storm chasers doing science and being professionals, and storm chasing being treated as a professional industry more so, and also how storm chasers can help out in collecting data, because the fact is there's probably nobody more passionate about weather than the storm chasing community out there. And also there's not many people that have such a diversified skill set with the technical skills. I mean, there are storm chasers that computer program, they can video edit, they can fly drones, they have all their licenses and everything too. And so I think that it was such a natural fit for storm chasers to participate in field science and in the warning process. And Tim was always kind of at the forefront of that with storm chasing.
Thank you.
And Reed, those were such kind words for Tim and just the community in general. And that day with El Reno, that was a tornado that surprised everyone. It grew in size so rapidly, and also its forward speed just increased so surprisingly as well. Can you break down the tornado and just that day in general and what it was like?
Yeah, it was one of those setups that lead to like the biggest, strongest tornadoes that I've ever chased in my career. Those ones like the Pilger setup, like Bennington, Kansas in 2013 is another one of those. The Manchester, South Dakota tornado setup in 2003 was a setup like that. The Pipestone, Manitoba tornado 2007 was similar. And basically later on in the season and in the summertime, late spring into summer, you can get those kind of post-frontal environments where you get the northerly winds that'll shift around to an easterly direction beneath kind of zonal flow aloft, or even relatively modest mid-level flow, but a ton of CAPE. So you get a lot of CAPE with those setups, slower storm motions. You get bigger tornadoes, big dew points, low LCLs, and extreme bulk shear too. And you get those easterlies beneath the westerlies in the mid-levels. And the Pilger setup was similar to that. And in fact, those 3 days were real similar to that as well. And even the core of Kansas set up a couple of days before El Reno. And so those types of setups have always led to those really large tornadoes. And the low level jets are so strong relative to the modest flow in the mid levels that they're moving more slowly. And so you get those tornadoes that'll curl off to the left. And those are kind of the tornadoes that I grew up chasing too, and getting started with those in the Southern Plains. And so you're always looking for that left-hand turn, like what the El Reno tornado did. And then you had the Bennington, Kansas tornado just before El Reno that I think might have even been a stronger tornado than El Reno. And both of those were preliminarily rated in EF5 and then downgraded to EF3 when the final rating came out, which I found interesting. But they both had loops in their track, kind of similar to the Yuma tornado, or even Eli up in Manitoba, which happened a day before the Pipestone, Manitoba tornado of June 23rd, 2007. And that was kind of a different setup, kind of an interesting setup, a storm kind of propagating south into that weaker low-level jet. But the next day was similar to one of those El Reno type setups that really destabilize. And a lot of times they're kind of in effective post-frontal environments. It's almost like you're bringing aspects of the high plains further east with deeper moisture and lower cloud bases, or taking like a Dixie Alley tornado moving at 60 miles an hour and making it stationary, and lasting for an hour. So it seems like that type of.
So I know, listen, Reed, I know MJ's got a question, but you're just ripping off these tornadoes and these
amazing
setups.
Yeah.
And I've talked about in the past, I do not have a memory for that kind of stuff. You've got to be the guy that when you go golfing, you remember going golfing a year ago and playing hole number 7 on your second shot,
right.
and how crazy of a shit. That's you, isn't it?
Yeah, I don't remember the events where we botched the storm chase, though. I remember the ones where we see
so you remember the good golf shots too. That's what it is.
I love that. Phil, I think the only thing we remember is Clovis, right? As well as everyone.
The whole body of work that was Clovis. I don't remember those dates, though, those individual dates of the Clovis thing. I just remember day after day of action. So I'm not remembering them as well anymore, I don't think.
So Reed, I have a question. Mark Johnson, MJ from Stormfront Freaks. You've talked a lot about self-funded, right? Doing research in a self-funded way. Is that your choice? Are you happy doing that, or have you done grant-based research? Have you looked, because you know so much and have such great technology that you're using to do this research? Just talk about that for a minute.
I have very limited experience with the grant-based research, because I think that once you kind of decide to take that storm chasing path, it can be difficult to kind of get back into the mainstream research or even fields of meteorology, for example. But more recently, at least in like the last 8 or 9 years, it does seem like storm chasers are finding their way into mainstream media a bit more, and kind of more in the field reporter type of a role. But I would love to apply for grants and kind of take a more organized approach, because it just seems like all these years just keep flying by, and are trying to use social media to fund research. But, I think associated with filing for research grants, though, is a lot of paperwork. And I'm definitely not very good with paperwork.
It is red tape, right? Yeah.
In my life. So any kind of paperwork.
And time, how much time do you have to take out of your chasing in order to put that grant together and figure that out too? I don't know. If you do it, good luck. That's all I say. Hey, before we get to some more questions here, I do want to highlight, we just went over the $1,000 donation mark.
Oh, wow.
So again, thank you, everybody. As we start driving to $2,000 is where we're going next. But I do want to highlight Barb Mack, $25, Red Cross Water Expert, $25, Jessica Gallagher, $50. Then we get into some rare air here. Cyclone Bruce Jones, who we just had on, donated $100. We've got Grant Lighty, $100. He's one of our Patreon members. So thanks, Grant. So again, thank you for all those donations. Where's our weather pattern going here this next week, Reed?
Yes.
Looks like you saw some interest there.
Yeah. I just took a photo too, so I could post and let everybody know that this awesome thing that you guys set up here today. 12 hours is a long time to broadcast. You guys need to.
We're sharing it. We're sharing the load. That's what it is. Bill and Weather Brains and James and Carolina Weather Group and Gabriel and Chaser Chat. And we even got Brad Panovich, I think, is taking an hour. So we're help a lot of hands, helps ease the load.
Nice. Well, it's awesome. And yeah, I think just ahead of maybe the pattern shift that's coming up on Monday potentially, or maybe even Sunday, some severe weather. But right after this, I'm going to get some new tires on the Dominator 4 at Discount Tire, and then probably blast west tomorrow and do that drive from Greenville, South Carolina. I'm at my mom's house actually right now, where Gizmo is retired here too.
Oh.
About to head west toward Monroe, I think, or maybe Shreveport for Monday. But those positively tilted troughs are kind of, can be kind of a pain, I think, kind of a signature about El Nino, I think. But I think there could be a couple of good, or not good necessarily, but a couple of big tornadoes maybe Monday night there near the Mississippi River, when that convection kind of hits the Mississippi, and maybe it'll be funneling the low-level jet a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. And Reed, I would love for you to describe, because not a lot of people chase and are the first on the scene for a disaster like you have been, right? And we're raising money for just all the disasters for the American Red Cross. But can you describe a little bit like the smells of, like, of wood, when the trees are completely like torn down and everything from a tornado, the natural gas you smell? Like, what is it like coming up on a scene where a town's been completely destroyed? And what is like the number one thing that people need when something like that happens?
Well, the smell definitely is so apparent when you come up on a damaged path, all the shredded vegetation, the wood as well, and a lot of times natural gas leaks. You can hear kind of whistling in the distance, and you can smell that kind of distinctive smell odor that natural gas gives off too. And sometimes you can even hear screams and everything too, of people that have just been hit by the tornado and people that are injured and everything too. And a lot of times it's pitch black, so you can't see anything. So the first thing you need is a flashlight, certainly, just to get out there to be able to see, because it knocks out the power and it's just pitch black. A lot of times they happen at night too, especially in Dixie Alley this time of year. But you need the standard first aid kit, and of course the one of the most important things is training. I think that all storm chasers should have that training as well. And so sometimes when you see someone that is injured and maybe you don't have the skills to help out, there's really nothing that's more helpless than that. If you arrive on a damaged path and don't have the training, or if you're not with somebody that has the training. A lot of times when I'm out storm chasing, I try to team up with people that have that first responder training. So if we do come upon a damaged path, they can help out. And a lot of times I just focus on transporting people to the hospital, because one of my skills is driving, I guess. So, and since I'm not as skilled as many of the other first responders out there and many other storm chasers that have that training, I just try to figure out my role in helping out in the recovery. And I try not to overstep my boundaries out there and overstep my training either. But yeah, I think a flashlight is really important when you come across a damage like that. Peace of mind, of course, remain calm. And it's one of the worst parts of storm chasing, definitely, when you come across damage like that, because you witness the suffering firsthand. Your storm chase is over, you're going to see stuff that's not very good to see too, and people need help, and you just have to barrel in there and help out the best that you can when you encounter those damage paths, and realize that you might see some things that are bad. But I think that the most important part is just to go through the training, and then or be with somebody that has the training when you encounter those damage paths.
And that's a really great point, because the American Red Cross does have, training for people like that, for everyone, if you want to take it, which is so important and so critical. And you've seen a lot of damage, Reed. I know that, with pavement scouring and all sorts of things. What is some of the most shocking things that you've seen, whether it's like plywood through a car, or, what are some of those things that you're like, wow, that's the true power of a tornado?
Well, the most shocking was probably the Philadelphia, Mississippi EF5 tornado during the super outbreak. And that one carved a slice into the ground that was a couple feet deep and like 200 yards wide. And just seeing all that clay displaced, and you could definitely tell how powerful the tornado was. And then Tuscaloosa, Alabama, seeing the damage there, I was kind of shocked that wasn't an EF5 as well. And just even realizing that a majority of the people are able to survive a damage path like that too, because seeing Tuscaloosa, you think nobody could survive this, but somehow it happens and a majority of the people do survive those tornado damage paths. I think what happens is maybe they go limp when the tornado hits, and even if they are transported downstream, but yeah, wow. I think it was the most shocking damage was Tuscaloosa and the May 3rd 99 damage, of course, and the EF5 that went through Moore in 2013, and just kind of all those big EF4, EF5 tornadoes when they go through an urban area. It's just shocking to see and apocalyptic how you see those stripped trees and stripped conifers, and it's crazy to see.
So Reed, we're getting ready for our Stormfront Freaks for our 200th episode. We're going to be doing that live January 4th at the Mount Washington Observatory.
Yeah,
we're going to be live up there. Hopefully we're going to be able to get up there. And of course, you're coming with us to join us on that expedition and adventure. But before we go to break, tell me what you're expecting with the El Nino situation. What are you expecting for the winter weather this year, especially maybe along that East Coast, Northeast coast?
Yeah, I think it'll be wet in the southern U.S. And if we can get some Arctic air coming in, we'll probably get a lot of ice storms. Like I could see another big mega ice storm in Oklahoma.
Great.
Portions of the center, a lot of overrunning events, positively tilted troughs, shallow Arctic air masses coming in, I think. But then if that active subtropical jet, I think we'll have a lot of candidates of storms that could go up the East Coast. I think it depends on how the North Atlantic sets up. If we can get a log jam in the North Atlantic, coupled with an active subtropical jet, then maybe we could get a good nor'easter up there. I hope so.
Yeah, right around January 4th. As long as it's not too bad. If it's not too bad, they might not be able to snowcat us up the mountain. But we're looking forward to that. Reed, thanks so much for giving us your time today and helping to promote the American Red Cross and disaster relief. Appreciate you joining us. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. Never stop chasing.
Yeah, so we're going to go to a break, but we got coming up next hour. We've got Trey Greenwood, Gabe Cox, the Weather Drama Team, and Mike Scatlin all are going to be with us next hour. So stay tuned and keep up those donations as we drive to 2,000. All right, Reed, thanks so much, man. Appreciate your time as always.
Thank you.
Yeah, good to see you.
Thank you for tuning in to the Stormfront Freaks podcast. You can watch our bi-weekly show live on youtube.com/StormfrontFreaks and download the audio version on your favorite podcast player. For links to our Patreon team of exclusive benefits, show notes, past shows, new videos, merchandise, and more, visit our website at stormfrontfreaks.com. While you're there, check out our interactive chaser radar from our friends at zoomradar.com. If you'd like to contact us with questions or make comments about the show, shoot us an email to questions@stormfrontfreaks.com or follow us on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, or TikTok. Search for Stormfront Freaks. We'd love to hear from you. Join us next time and tell a friend about the Stormfront Freaks podcast.